You're listening to The Real Deal Conversations, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you by sharing real stories and meaningful conversations that bring real life to the surface. I'm your host, Megan Deal. Let's dive in. We are continuing in our coaching series with, coaching and leadership. And today we have Jayme Donnelly, head coach of Ozark in Ozark, Missouri. Thanks for coming on, Jayme.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes, I am pumped too. This has been a really fun series so far. I've been getting to know Jayme a little bit before we started recording, and he's a pretty cool guy, pretty cool dude. So I'm excited about this, and we're just going to kind of dive in. So what inspired you to become a basketball coach, and what has kept you passionate?
Yeah, so the thing that's probably the biggest influence on me becoming a coach, I've been raised with a lot of teachers in my life. My grandfather was a history teacher and coach. My dad was a coach. And so I think over time, it's just one of those things, what do you want to do when you get older? And I've just always loved the game so much. And that's an easy way to just kind of stay plugged in, is when you're a coach, it's just a nice little bridge from player to coach. So that was one of the things, early on, I just kind of felt like that was where I needed to be and something I loved doing. And then what's kind of kept me passionate is honestly just being around the players, and we kind of talked about it before starting the podcast. It's kind of a way to stay youthful and kind of stay plugged into kind of what's going on culturally and things like that in the world. And so it's fun every year because you have a new team, you have new players, you have new relationships to build. So every year is a new experience and just a great opportunity to learn and get better. And so I just think that's something that I've always been drawn to in the game and the coaching profession.
That's awesome. And you were telling me before this, you have history playing basketball as well. And your dad has some history with basketball. So tell me I know this isn't one of the questions, but tell me just a little bit about that, because I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So as far as my dad is, he's probably been the person who's put the ball in my hand from a very young age. Yeah. He was a college basketball scout for a long time, talent evaluator. And kind of as he got older, he became a head coach and kind of jumped around between girls teams, boys teams, summer AAU teams, just kind of a variety of coaching. And so that was awesome, growing up in that kind of household. And, it was very important to us, watching film and watching games together, going on basketball trips. I think that was kind of the coolest thing as a kid, was getting to go to these high profile events and getting to see guys who are the top players in the nation. And I'm sitting here front row getting to soak it all in. And so I think that kind of goes into that passion too, is when you get to see that up close, not every kid gets that.
Right.
And so that was really something that was pretty awesome to grow up in and just get to tell those stories and share those memories with your dad. And so definitely something I'm very, blessed with and glad I got to experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where did you play in college?
Yeah. So high school, I'm from Lynn, Missouri. That's where I graduated from. And then that brought me down to Evangel University, played for Coach Jenkins there for 4 years. And then that kind of got me into the coaching scene here in Southwest Missouri, getting started with Kickapoo and then going to Willard, back to Kickapoo, and then now here at Ozark.
At Ozark. All right. Which, guys, Jayme may be a little bit of a rival for me because I'm Nixa.
Yes.
So, but I can be Switzerland. Okay. When it comes to basketball season, I'll high five all y'all.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. So, all right. Can you talk about the role of mentorship in your coaching style, and who were your mentors?
Yeah. So, again, I would say my dad's got to be up there. He's kind of the one who set that foundation with me. He's somebody I talk to even to this day, every single day. So he kind of holds me accountable in a way that a lot of others maybe can't or don't, just because of that deeper relationship with your dad. So that's probably one of my most important ones. And then my high school coach is really like a second father to me. I mean, we are very close. He probably pushed me maybe harder than anybody else. I probably got pushed in practice harder in high school than I ever did in college. Just how intense our practices were, the expectations, how hard we went. And so he really set kind of the tone for what kind of the rest of my, not just playing career, but eventually coaching career. A lot of those things I took with me there too. And then Coach Jenkins is maybe one of the greatest coaches I've ever been around. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He was at Evangel for over 40 years. And he really taught me not just about basketball, but he really taught me how to be a man. He taught me the important part of life, sacrifice, grace, things that I was maybe not very good at when I was kind of that age, between 18 and 22. And I think that really changed me in a way that I needed. It kind of softened me in a lot of ways to just be more gracious with things and just have a different perspective on life other than just worrying about wins and losses. And I think that was really important at that time in my life. So that was something, those three in particular really stand out to me. And then, I've had the luxury of coaching with and learning from some of the greatest coaches in Southwest Missouri over the last 20 years with Coach Rippey and Coach Lamont Frazier at Willard. And then, Mitch McHenry, not just as a friend, but somebody who I look up to greatly, and really kind of as a young coach when we first started together at Kickapoo, really set the stage of like, this is how you do it. Like, this is how things go. And these are, how expectations need to be. And he just ran with it. And I was, glad to just be kind of part of that and grow within that program. And, without those things, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have the opportunities I have. So all of those people mean a lot to me, and they've kind of set me up to now kind of blaze my own trail and then do the same thing for young coaches that are within our staff. So that's kind of the mentality I have.
And something that you had mentioned earlier before the show started that stands out to me, honestly, is that you were presented the opportunity to be an assistant coach and not get paid for it at the time. And it stands out to me because I think it says a lot about your character. You are willing to seize opportunity and see the opportunity before you, even though it doesn't come with all the things that people typically, especially these days, a lot of people are like, how much am I going to get paid? I'm not like, there's just this high spoiled mentality kind of, and the fact that you seized that, and it was kind of a priceless opportunity for you because you were able to, learn so much and take so much, even though you were doing so much on the outside, like you mentioned, working jobs. And so you mentioned, younger coaches and all that. And I want to encourage, people who are coming up, or if you're listening to this and you're younger, 18 or 19, I want you to kind of take a little bit from Jayme and seizing opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important in life. Everybody talks about, there's only going to be an open door of opportunity for so long. And if I didn't take it, somebody else was going to. It meant a lot to me. Like, again, going back to like when I was a kid and seeing Kickapoo, even though not being from Springfield or Southwest Missouri, you still knew who Kickapoo was, and you still understood like the talent and the program and all these things. And so even though I wasn't fully immersed in that from a kid in terms of like being in the area, like, I'm like, I can't pass this opportunity up. Like, you'd be stupid not to. And really, I think so many times we want to have a reason why we can't. And I think we need to have better perspective of how we can and how can we make this work. And that 2-year sacrifice paid huge dividends, because if I didn't do that then, I probably wouldn't have ended up at Willard. I wouldn't have ended up back at Kickapoo. And I wouldn't be here as a head coach. And so I just think those opportunities, like, don't be afraid of taking that leap of faith and, being willing to learn and not being, I think a lot of times, going back to, that entitlement or kind of that is that we think like, well, I've got a degree, I've got all these things, like, look at me. And the reality is the world is pretty harsh and it's hard. And we don't always realize how hard it is until you get in there. So I just think it's one of those things, when you have an opportunity, like, make the most of it. I tell our kids that all the time, is be where your feet are. I think we worry about what somebody else has or what somebody else is given, and that should have been me, or I wish I had that. But then sometimes we get those and then we're afraid. And so I just think it's just taking that leap of faith and just and really putting everything you have into it. Like, not to pat myself on the back, but I dove in head first. I mean, I was there and whatever they need me for. I mean, it didn't matter to me. I remember, they asked me to go scout in Little Rock, and me and my wife, it was before she was my wife, she filmed and I did all the notes, and I wasn't getting paid a penny. And it was something that her and I still talk about. Like, hey, you remember that one time we drove all the way down those curvy roads down in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas and scouted a team just so we could have And those are things that you remember. And like, we weren't thinking about money, we weren't thinking about anything, but like, what do they need from us? Like, how can we serve? How can we help? So I just think that that's such an important aspect just in life too. Like just, not just in careers and things like that, but just, if you're needed somewhere and you have the opportunity, then why not?
I love that quote. Be where your feet are.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. Can I steal that?
It's my favorite. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah. I use it all the time. I think it's very important.
So good. All right. How do you foster a team culture that encourages both personal and athletic growth?
I think the thing about team culture, both personal and athletic growth, is all about consistency. I think it's easy to talk about culture and put a quote on a shirt or to put a sign up in a locker room. And we sometimes think that that's culture. But I think when you really think about culture, it's your day-to-day mentality. It's your day-to-day expectations. And are you following through with those expectations? So like me as the head coach, if I allow certain things to fall through the cracks, then that's going to show up later in other facets of the game or life or whatever that is. So being consistent with how we approach every day is, I think, a good start with that. And then just promoting those things that you would promote to anybody that's even not an athlete, your work ethic, your responsibility, your discipline, because those are things that aren't just going to help you in sports, but as you grow up into an adult and you become independent, those are things that you're going to have to lean into even more when you're in that situation. So to me, like, that's how you build both the athletic and the personal growth of a student athlete. And so that's just something I'm very big on. Like, I try to say the same things every day and make sure that they know, like, these are our expectations. This is what we do, and this is who we are. And from there, I think it feeds itself, honestly, like, because, something I'm starting to recognize now with our players is now it's our players saying this is the expectation. I don't have to say anything. So it is now becoming who we are and what we expect of each other instead of just something we talk about or that's just posted that, is just more lip service. And, something I tell our guys all the time is, I'm from the show me state. You got to show me. Like, if we're going to be about it, you got to show me. It's not just something we talk about. Everybody talks anymore, whether it's on social media, we all want to talk the big game, but at the end of the day, it's what are you really doing? And so that's something that I try to be consistent with our guys, and just that we need to be able to show, if somebody came in and watched our practice, they should know what's important to us, and not just us talking about it, but you will see it when you see our guys, and whether that's in the practice setting or just in life, like, you should see some of those things bleeding through.
That's awesome. All right. How do you help your players not only become better athletes, but better individuals off the court? And we were talking a little bit about this earlier, like, basketball, it goes into life. So how do you help your players not just be good basketball players, but good character and integrity and individuals? So
some of the things that I like to do, and again, this goes back to some of those mentors, some of those coaches that I've learned from, is giving back and serving our community. Whether that, we went to Convoy of Hope as a team and did that together and volunteered. We volunteered in the concession stand for senior night this past Friday, and just doing different things that promote the things that we talk about. Again, like, if I'm going to expect these of you, I need to also be about those. I need to show those. And then we're going to do those things to promote, because if we're acting selfless in those moments, we will hopefully act selfless on the floor. And we understand that community is important and that our team is important and all these different things. So it's just one of those things of being consistent. Again, just going back to consistency. If I'm going to tell you to do something, like, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I myself am not also doing. And so I think just different ways of pairing those things together, because again, as you become an adult, my hope is that you saw the worth in going to Convoy of Hope and donating your time and volunteering, not to like feel good about ourselves in a catastrophe, but it's one of those deals of like, you are helping people in need because of something we did on a Thursday night together. And I just think that that's a cool thing, that as they get older, my hope is that, hey, your family might go volunteer your time, or you might donate your time at the Salvation Army, or you might go in another way of serving. One thing we'll do is we'll, adopt a family at Christmas and make sure that they have those things. That's something my dad always did. And again, so I think it's things that my mentors were very big on. And it's like, I want to do those same things. Like, I want our kids to live a life of service, and I want them to see that there is more than just ourselves. The society around us tells us that it's about us. It's about me. It's about what's in it for me. And I really want to flip that in reverse, that it's a lot more about the people around us, and it's a lot more about what we can do for each other, because life, like as we said, is hard. It's difficult. There's going to be times when we need each other to do that. So I just think having those elements within your program, and not just being basketball all the time and it being transactional with, if you're not getting me wins, then we're not happy. It's like, there is so much more to this program than just what we do in the gym. And it's how we treat each other off the floor. It's how we serve our community. And I think if you build a foundation of those things, then the wins come naturally. And really, you've already won, because,
I love that. I love that, because one, it is my belief that the most important trait of a leader is humility and servanthood. And so I love that you are instilling that into your players. It literally makes my heart leap for joy. And when you add that level of humility and servanthood, how much better teammates are they going to be?
Yes.
I mean, you're like lovingly taking their ego down. That is so cool. Honestly, it makes my heart leap for joy. Let's move on. So what is the most important life lesson basketball has taught you, and how do you pass it on to your players?
So one thing, this is a quote from my high school coach, but like I said, we would have some just brutal practices. I mean, just hard practices. And he would always say, if this is the worst thing you have to go through in your life, you've lived a pretty easy life. And that's always stuck with me, because there's a lot harder things that I've had to go through in life since that moment. And I always think back to like how miserable I felt and how like defeated and just like ready to quit. And it makes you just think that when life gets really tough, like you have to rely on your teammates, whether that's a spouse, whether that's family members, whether that is those in your inner circle, your friends, things like that. But there is going to come a time when you're not going to be able to do it on your own. And you're going to have to, have those relationships. You're going to have those people you trust. And so to me, it's a great life lesson. Team sports is a great life lesson because it teaches you how to work with others. It teaches you how to find solutions, teaches you how to work with people you don't always like to work with. We all have maybe family members that we don't particularly like or want to be around all the time. But at the same time, we got to love them, and you might have to show up for them in a time when they need you. And it just teaches you a lot, to me, just about life. Like just, again, servanthood, just, working together, discipline, and just kind of starting to practice those things. And before you know it, and you're an adult and you start realizing like, it's not a big deal getting up at 6 a.m. because I had to get up for conditioning, to do this throughout my whole life. And like, this is easy, especially like, if you love your job or whatever, it's just kind of one of those things that like, you start thinking back and it's like, well, this kind of helped me with that. Like this set me up for that. So
that's awesome. Daniel, my husband, he always like, because of the adversity you face in sports, he's like, man, I can like, now he'll be like, I can get yelled at, I can get whatever, and it doesn't even faze me.
Absolutely. That's another, I try to tell some people, like, I don't know if like I give off like a soft persona. If you've ever seen me coach, like it's the opposite of that. But people will say something to me and they're like, hey, I'm not trying to offend you. And I'm like, I have very tough skin. Like you could like rip me to shreds and I'll like smile and say, I'll get it done. Like, I'm like, I've gotten my butt chewed plenty of times by multiple people. Like that doesn't really faze me.
And it was old school coaches.
Oh yes.
So it was like, not even close to what you think you have a coach that's mean now. Like go back to the old school. Daniel was like cussed out all the
100%. And so I mean, it's just kind of one of those things like, like, it's just kind of part of it.
100%. All right. So what is your approach to building confidence in players who are struggling with self-doubt?
So I was a classroom teacher before I started doing PE at Ozark. And my favorite thing on test day was a kid showing up, we have a test today, and then start panicking, stressing, and having self-doubt, like I don't, whatever. And to me, that I try to tell my players, it's all about the preparation. We're all going to have slumps. We're, the best players in the world who practice every day, make millions doing what they do, have slumps, have games, multiple games where they don't perform at the level that they're used to playing. And it all goes back to their preparation. The last thing they do, or they're not going to sulk and mope. They're going to get back in the gym and they're going to keep working. They're going to go back to the fundamentals. They're going to go back to basics until they work themselves out of that slump. And so I think to me, with a high school athlete, it's like, well, you're not a professional, so you better get back to the basics and you better find a way to prepare both mentally and physically. I think that's such a big, important part of the game anymore is the mental side. There's a lot of distractions that were not there when we were kids and when we were in high school. And I think that is a bigger problem than what athletes realize is just the lack of the mental preparation, the lack of thinking through the game in a way that's going to prepare you when the lights come on.
Yeah.
And I think the kids that are doing those things are finding themselves a lot less anxious and a lot less worried. And they feel at peace because they've already done so many mental reps that it set them up for success when the lights do come on.
So what mental reps and, prepping, for, mentally prepping, what does that look like?
Sure. So when I was in high school, and what kind of got me started on that is I took a psychology class.
Okay.
And one of the units was sports psychology. And so we each got assigned like a different part of the sports psychology world. And one of the things that I got was pregame meditation. And so I kind of did a deep dive into it. And it was really like kind of an eye-opening light bulb moment for myself. And I'm like, this is actually a good idea. Like, why wouldn't you do this? And so starting in my junior year of high school, before a game, like on a bus, or if it was a home game just in the locker room by myself, I would just close my eyes and I would literally, like a movie reel, envision things that I would need to do throughout the game.
Okay.
Whether that was, you might be shooting a shot off of a certain play, rebounding, just whatever it was, whatever you thought, whatever was on the game plan, and just go through those reels. And over and over and over of what that would look like, and almost kind of like predicting the game in a way.
Yeah.
And I would do that. And I started to notice how much calmer I was before games, because I would get like, not necessarily performance anxiety, but I would kind of get that pit in my stomach.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big game. There's a lot of people. There's coaches here watching me. There's this, there's that. And it kind of took that element into a place where it was a good anxiety. It was like I was excited to go perform rather than like worried about the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell kids, like, and I'll even sometimes do it myself with our kids before a big game, is I'll just have them close their eyes. And I say, I just want you to think about the game, and I want you to think about what your role is, or what's something you're going to have to do tonight that's going to make us successful. Yeah. And I just think those small battles and small wins are what allow you to kind of calm, take a breath, and know that you have done the preparation to perform. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. We can't always control if the ball is going to go in. We can't always control, foul trouble or whatever the case may be. So, but at the end, it's like you don't have this desperation, like anxiety, like that's like controlling you. So I just think that that's something that, is really important for kids, and just being able to talk through those things and be realistic about like things you need to improve on, and we all have a role. I try to tell kids that all the time. Like, there's nothing wrong with being good at one thing. Like, you don't need to be good at everything, but if you can be great at your role, you'd be surprised at the opportunity that you get. And I think that's the same thing in life. Like, we don't have to be a chemist, a teacher, a, astronaut, a fireman. You just need to be really good at what you do, and then build from there and make that, part of who you are, and get really good. And so I just think some of those elements are pretty important for kids today, especially because it's such a highlight generation. Everybody's chasing, am I going to go viral? Am I going to get this? Am I going to get recognized by my peers? And so it's more about the transaction than it is about that process of like, was I prepared? And if I wasn't, what can I do next time that's going to put me in a better situation? So I think that's such a big part of performing in any, whether you're getting ready for, keynote speech, whatever. I don't know if you follow Alan Stein at all, but he's a big public speaker. He used to be big in the basketball world. He was a trainer and then coach. And now he like travels the globe to talk about, leadership and things like that. And he's one of my favorite people. But even today, as big as he's gotten and as many speeches as he's given, he always goes to the stage the day before and he does his whole speech in front of nobody because he wants to have that feeling that I've already done this.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to say. I know the message that I want to speak to. And so that's important. And, that doesn't change. And I always remember even my dad, like this, again, sorry, but I think of my dad when we'd go to AAU tournaments and we'd be playing, 20, 30 minutes away from the hotel. Well, the night before we'd always drive to the venue. So he knew how long was it going to take? Are we going to, because if you're late, we hit traffic, whatever, it's like all of a sudden you miss your game and now, you're in trouble. So I even think about little things like that. Like you're just preparation. Are you doing the things necessary to set you up for success? Or are you just expecting to happen organically and just by chance or luck? And I just think, I
love that.
You're going to probably catch it between the eyes if you're not prepared versus that preparation.
But that's good. And I love that added piece to it, because I think, you do the rhythm, you go out there, you shoot your shots, you do all that practice. But I think it's so good to add that insight into what does that mental preparation look like?
Yeah.
Like what, and to teach them, what that looks like, and very simple too.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't,
simple.
it takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how long you're wanting to do that. And, I think that's something that could definitely separate you. Not just, I even do it as a coach, like the night before, I'll write down our plays. I'll like basically give myself a scenario. You're down 2, it's a minute to go. You have 1 timeout. And so I know in that moment we get into a similar situation. I've already gotten my stuff written down. I know exactly what I want to do. And so it gives me an advantage and a calming advantage where I'm not frantic in the moment, like who's got to play. Yeah. I've already been through the scenario in my own head. Yeah. So this is something I'm ready for. I'm not surprised by it. I'm, prepared. Yeah. So
that's awesome. All right. How do you handle the pressure and expectations, both from within your team and externally, like from fans and parents?
As you know, this area is incredibly competitive on the basketball side. The Springfield SPS League mixed with your, I guess we're all in the COC now, but it's incredibly competitive. There is obviously a lot of pressure for almost every school in our conference to do well. And to me, pressure means that you're expected to do something, like you have expectations. And that's a good thing to me. That's something like I've always relished as a player. If somebody is putting pressure on you, like, oh, it's a big game, you better win the big game, or you better be able to do this. I'd rather be in that situation than be the team that's getting our head beat in. And you're like, well, good luck, but you're going to lose by 50. So to me, pressure is like a positive thing, in my opinion. And I think if you frame it in the right set of mind, it can be something that pushes you and allows you to get more out of your coaches and your players. So I just think not necessarily practicing those pressure. It's hard to replicate pressure in a practice setting. It just is. No matter what you do, you can stream in crowd noise over whatever, but it's not going to replicate the game day feel of what that all looks like and the pressure that you feel. So I just think it's something that, again, if you're prepared and you've done what you're supposed to do, win or lose, you can live with the outcome. I've told every team since I've started coaching, I could care less about the score. I really could. And people who know me are like, yeah, okay, like you are incredibly competitive. And that is true. Yeah. But if I know we gave it our best, if I know we executed, if I know we're playing for each other and we did everything in our power and it just didn't go our way, I can live with that 10 times out of 10. So to me, that's more important than anything else. The numbers on the scoreboard don't matter to me. It's a matter of how are we operating together? How are we treating each other? Because then that stuff takes care, like I said earlier, it takes care of itself.
That's so good. All right. So how do you stay grounded in the high pressure, of the games, the seasons? How do you stay grounded? Does it go back to, your, like what you were talking about, how you envision it, or is there something else?
Yeah. So I think in terms of perspective, I think it's important to have like an inner circle who's honest with you. I can tell you that like my dad is one of those people, like he's the first person to be very brutally honest. And that's okay. Like, I don't mind that. So I think that's important to have people who will be real with you and be authentic and not just tell you something that you want to hear. I think there's a lot of people who do that anymore. And I appreciate somebody being upfront, real and authentic with me because that's going to make me better and it's going to help me grow as an individual. And again, we can't be so soft to those things Because again, I think social media and the culture that we have in our society is one that like, we only want the good stuff. Like, tell me all the good stuff about me. But when you start diving into those things that we struggle with, it's like, who really wants to hear that? And I think those are the parts that really allow us to grow. So I think on the perspective side, that's important, and something that Coach Jenkins always told us. You know, we had some huge games at Evangel. You know, we beat the number 1 team in the nation. We did these different things. And he'd always come back and say, you're not as good as your best win, and you're not as bad as your worst loss. And I think that's so true. Like, there are going to be games when you don't perform, and there are going to be games when you overperform and surprise somebody, but that doesn't mean that that's always. And you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have those moments throughout a season. So I think maintaining an even keel, calm, demeanor is very important throughout a season, because, we don't want to be front runners in terms of when it's good, we're going to be good. And when things go bad, we're just going to turn on each other and until maybe some way it gets better. But usually that's not the way it goes. It usually, if it's bad and you're going to turn on each other, it's going to continue to get worse and worse. So that's really important to me in terms of keeping that perspective. And at the end of the day, I try to tell our kids this all the time. Basketball is a game. It is meant to be fun. It is meant to be enjoyed. And I think a lot of times we are so warped in thinking that it's all about wins. It's all about getting to college. It's all about whatever. And at the end of the day, like, most of what we remember about our high school sports, like, I couldn't tell you a single score about it, any of the high school games that I played in. I couldn't tell you one. But I could tell you about 10 stories off the cuff about relationships with guys in the locker room, funny stories, funny moments at practice, these moments that nobody else saw but us that we still talk about. So to me, like, when we really think about life and like what's important, are we really going to put all of our eggs in the basket of winning, or are we going to have those moments that we share forever, that when we get together and sit down and talk or have a reunion or whatever, it's like, do you remember when that happened at practice? And everybody remembers it. But then I say, hey, do you remember the score of, when we played so-and-so? Well, no, because it's not about winning. It's, it's about those bonds, the relationship and that brotherhood that you form, or sisterhood that you form throughout a season. And those are the ones that last a lifetime. Those wins are going to come and go. Those aren't going to last forever.
I think in this day in 2024, and with social media, and like what you mentioned earlier, everything's about highlights and who's got, I think it is kind of taking away the fun for the players, because there's like unhealthy competitiveness coming out amongst players, just kind of across the board, not anywhere specific, but because there is that pressure now, like everything's recorded, everything's highlighted, everything's, I need to get this many likes. And
I'll speak to that too. Is here's one thing that I've seen as a coach, and this is something I haven't fully figured out. Because of that element of like everything is out there. I mean, everything is recorded. Is there are so many kids who are afraid to really put themselves out there, like like, if I fail, I'm going to fall flat on my face. There are not very many kids who are willing to do that anymore. They're scared to death of the backlash of it being on the internet forever. And they can't handle that. They can't handle that guilt and that shame of like, well, they're going to know so-and-so broke my ankles in this game and it's going to live on the internet forever and I'll never be able to live that down. When in reality, every one of us have been in that situation as a basketball player. Some of them might be on YouTube. Some of them might not, depending on what era you played in. But at the end of the day, it's happened to all of us. We've all had those moments of failing. Who hasn't? But there's such an emphasis now because of the social media element. And so there's a lot of kids who would rather not try than try and fail. And that to me is almost a bigger issue at hand with when we think about our kids, putting them in situations where they can fail. And I always try to tell our kids, like in a practice setting, like I call it their sandbox. Like every like major startup company has had their moment, like a garage that they worked in, fail free. Does this work? Does it not work? Well, I'm the only one who gets to see that failure. And in practice, that's your sandbox. That's your opportunity to see, does this work? Does this not work? Why did this go really wrong? Why did this go really well? And then when you get to games, you've already played in the sandbox to understand what has worked and what has not. So now there's not that sense of, I'm afraid to fail. You already failed. You failed in a setting that was safe. And, that's okay. Like, and I think just giving those kids that element of it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to struggle. The hard part is how do you keep them pushing in the direction of overcoming those obstacles, overcoming those failures or those mishaps? That is the hard part with kids. And I think it's got to be an all hands on deck with parenting, with coaches, teachers, all of those different elements of a young kid, growing up. But I just think too many times, whether it's maybe the coaching side or maybe it could be the parent side, when it's about the winning, when it's about your stats, and that's what you're hearing, now all of a sudden you have even more of a reason not to fail. And so I don't know. I just think it's a very hard thing to just say this would fix it. I think there's a lot of variables, a lot of elements, but I just think getting kids to understand that failure is part of sports. That's why you're playing. It's part of life too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a new thing in the last few years.
Yes.
And so it's not something, and it's like a new thing that everybody's having to adjust to. How do we? And so I love that you add, that perspective. And I'm glad you said everything you said, because it's something that needs to be acknowledged. Yeah. We do have a little bit of a problem, not just in basketball, but across the board with teens. Exactly what you said, being afraid to fail because there's a camera all the time. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you put some words to that. I really appreciate that. All right. So what advice would you give to young coaches just starting out in their careers?
So the first thing I would say as a young coach is no matter the level, no matter the age group, any of those things is, again, don't be afraid to fail. It's okay to try new things. It's okay to be yourself. I think one of the issues that I had when I first started coaching is I tried desperately to coach like my high school coach. Now, do we have some similarities in how we coach? Sure. But we are very different too. And I think I put so much, because I respected him so much as a coach, and I loved getting coached how he coached us, that I just figured, well, everybody would love getting coached like that. And in my first year at Willard, we won one game, my first year as a JV coach. I have never in my life, no matter what I've played, ever had a losing season. That was the hardest year of my life. It was my first year in marriage. It was so hard. My wife even says that. She's like, we can never go back to that. That was such a hard year. And it was so hard for my ego. It was so hard for me internally to just deal with failure. I mean, we talk about failure. I was struggling so hard. People are thinking this guy doesn't know anything. Yeah. They're terrible. And so to me, the best advice I had was, and my dad told me this because, he just said, you've got to coach to your personality. You have to be you. The kids are going to attach to you a lot more of you being authentically you than you trying to be somebody else that they don't even know who that is. So he said, you just got to be you and build those relationships like how and things like that. And so that was some of my best advice was just be you. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to be a coach you see on TV. Don't try to be your mentor. Be you. And the kids will follow if they know that you are authentically coaching them the way that is important, that's positive and everything else. So I think that's important. I think the other thing too, kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, was that, don't be afraid to take a job that is maybe a little lower on the totem pole. That's a little bit more, you're not getting paid a bunch of money or whatever. Because I can tell you those 2 years at Kickapoo, I did about everything you could do in coaching, whether that was laundry, sweeping the floor, snack bags, you name it. I was just the grunt doing whatever was being asked of me. But as I got older and got deeper into the profession and was kind of moving up the ranks, I knew how to do so many things behind the scenes. I wasn't needing somebody else to do it. I knew how to do it. I knew how to do it well. And then now as a head coach, it's I've done, outside of coaching my first varsity game, it's I've done pretty much everything you could guess in a coaching role. And I think that is so important if you're wanting to become a head coach at some point, is don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to step up if something needs done, like laundry. I mean, I think I did laundry 7 years that I was at Kickapoo. I did it at Willard for 2. And it's like, it might be seen it, but like a lot of people would put their nose down to that and say, I'm the JV coach. You make the freshman coach do that.
Yeah.
So if like that's going to be our mindset and perspective, then how does that come across to our kids? So then all of a sudden you have your seniors. Well, I'm not going to carry the waters. That's a freshman's job.
Yeah.
But if you are showing that I'm doing this as part of my service to you and my job, that benefits everybody. And you're not like asking for whatever. It's all behind the scenes. Nobody sees that. Nobody has any idea. But it's something that you know that you're doing out of the willingness of what's right or what's important. And so I think if you're a young coach, just dive in. Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about the glitz and the glam and all those things that'll come with the time that you spend and the time that you put into it. And then just be a lifelong learner. You know, it's one thing I think I've wanted to be, why I've wanted to be a teacher has been, I love learning. And so I think when you start getting too big for your britches in terms of thinking, you know, everything is right whenever you're going to get humbled. So I think living a life of wanting to learn from the coaches that you're with. I mean, there's something I've taken away from every single coach that I've worked with, good or bad. Things I learned from, like, I am not handling. And I actually have a Google Doc that I started in my second year at Willard of the things to remember when you're a head coach. And so if stuff would pop up, I would just type it in my Google Doc. And so when I got the job at Ozark and I was kind of like elated, I'm like, I need to go back to that document because now that is coming for real. And going back and looking at those different moments, like you get kind of a chuckle and you get kind of like different things that you forget about. But it's like, I'm really glad I wrote that down because that would probably come up at some point. And I've got that written down, or like I've got something to remember or what I want to do with the program. And so I just think those things are important and just grow within it, you know, love the kids. You know, that's one thing I've always really tried to, that's been very important to me, is a relationship I have with our players. You know, I try to keep in touch with as many of our guys as we can from all the schools I've coached at, and just trying to, you know, it's more than just that coach-player relationship. It's like, you guys are becoming husbands, you're becoming, you know, spouses, you're becoming fathers, you know, there's all these different elements of your world now. And so it's like, to me, that relationship now is the part where I get to kind of sit back and look, did I help you grow into the person that I hope you are? Or, you know, are you kind of going through it right now? You know, whatever that case may be. So I don't know. I just think those relationships, and those are the things, like we talked about earlier, those are what lasts forever. I mean, those are the things I enjoy the most, is getting a random text from a former player. Hey, I was thinking about you today. I was thinking about this moment in practice when you made us run, you know? And again, it's never about any of the big games. It's like, I remember when you were mad at practice. And so I just think those are so funny, that like what we remember. And so it's just, to me, like, that's the most important if you're just getting started, or even if you've been in the coaching profession for a while. Like, I think those are all things that we can, you know, consistently do and make important. Yeah,
that's so good. All right. Your final question.
Okay.
What legacy do you want to leave?
That's a great question. The legacy that I want to leave is, I want to build a program at Ozark that continues to push the relational value of people, that when they graduate, they want to come back. It's one thing I'm very jealous of what Coach McHenry has done at Kickapoo, is we got to do something special last year. Right before I had gotten the job at Ozark. And so I was kind of, you know, transitioning over there, and I was still working at Kickapoo, and they kind of had like an alumni day where a bunch of our guys were back from college. And the amount of guys that were in that gym from the 7 years that I was there as an assistant, it like made me tear up.
That's awesome.
Because it's just like, this is the legacy that I want. When our guys leave, I want them to come back. I want them give back to our next group of guys coming up. And I want there to be a relationship with the coaches, the players, and it to be something special, something that we can sit back and talk about and remember those good times that we had together. So to me, that is the most important part of the legacy that I hope to leave, is leave it better than I found it. You know, I want it to be in a better situation than when I got the job. But I also want our guys to love coming back. They want to see us. They want to see the guys. They want to come to games. They want to start their families, you know, if they want to stay local or whatever that looks like, that, you know what, Ozark was so good to me that this is where I want to raise raise my family and this
Yeah.
is what I want to do, or I want to get into coaching. That's been another cool thing is being able to see previous players who are like showing interest in the coaching profession. And, and one of my assistants, Micah McIntyre, I coached for 4 years at Kickapoo.
Yeah.
So it's such a cool thing. I got to coach you for 4 years and now I have the opportunity for you to coach with me.
So
and I just think that those are things that are priceless to me.
Yeah.
Those be things we remember more than any amounts of money we ever make and anything else. So that would be the legacy that I want to leave. Like I want our people in the Ozark community to, love our program. I want them to be proud of the people we are. I want them to be proud of how hard we play, how we play together, and that we are people dedicated to service and that we are about each other. We're not about ourselves. And I just think that's such an important part because the world tells us the opposite. And I think that that's part of the problem with a lot of issues in our world is the issue of selfishness and what's in it for me. And I think the more kids that I can reach to flip that script a little bit, I think the better our world becomes and the better our community comes in Ozark. So that's what's probably most important to me.
Man, I have loved this and loved hearing everything that you have had to said. It's so good. This just keeps getting better and better with you guys. This is our third one in this leadership series and you guys are just bringing so much value. And this is exciting.
Yeah.
So,
I really appreciate it. I love talking both basketball, leadership, perspective. I'm very big on all those things. So if you ever need another guest, I'd love to do it.
I love it. That's awesome.
It's, like I said, something I love talking about and it's, very big passion of mine in my life. And so just excited for the opportunity and get to kind of speak from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I love it. All right, Jayme, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.